Please welcome Ellen S. Alberding, Joyce Foundation President.
Hello. Thanks so much for sticking around for one of the very last panels. I am so honored to be here with our CPD Superintendent, Eddie Johnson, who's on his way out to join us, and CEO Janice Jackson from the Chicago Public Schools.
Thank you.
So I feel incredibly fortunate to have Janice and Eddie here with us today. It's actually kind of a miracle that they were able to make it. And the mayor is negotiating, working on a few things that you probably know about. So she may be able to make it and she may not. So we're just going to plunge right in and have a conversation. And if she's able to make it, great. But I think we've got two wonderful spokespeople for the city here. So let's just go right into it. First of all, I want to say, I just love our city. And I think everybody in this room is here because you love our city. And when I travel around the country and I talk to other people involved in the business world or in the corporate world or in philanthropy or in law enforcement, one thing that I really feel is something unique in our city is the incredible amount of collaboration and cooperation that goes on among the folks in this room and the folks up on this stage. And it makes our city work better and feel better and be a better city than it otherwise would have been. Thank you, yeah. And it's important, even though we have so many challenges, to realize the incredible progress that our city has made in many, many ways. And I'll just point to CPS. Over a decade and a half and several leaders, but under fantastic leadership now, our city has made better progress academically than 96% of other cities in the United States. That's an amazing fact. And we'll get into this in a few minutes, but part of that is because we have a very, very data-focused leader who is not messing around. She wants to see the data, and she's making decisions based on data, also with humanity, and also as a parent. And so that kind of leadership is really important. Now, on homicides and shootings, everybody is obviously concerned about where we've been, but it's also important to realize that we've had a 30% reduction in homicides since the peak in 2016. We're nowhere near where we want to be, but again, we have great leadership and tremendous hard work on the part of the police department. And so I've been very honored and privileged to work with each of these folks over time, as well as their predecessors. I'm really, really thrilled that our new mayor has identified and stuck with the great leadership that was in place when she arrived. And I think that's a testament to good leadership on her part as well. So I'd like to start with Janice. I wanted to talk to you about measurement and data. There is a push from some corners to not measure so much, not give grades, not use data to measure progress. Yeah. And I wonder what your response is to that and why you're sticking with your focus on data.
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, I think that and I'll talk about this from two different perspectives. I definitely understand where some of the criticism comes from and why people are cautioning us to think about how we use measurement, because there are countless examples in history that we can point to where measurement and data was used to reinforce things that were not necessarily equitable or fair. And so I definitely get where that angle comes from. But if you think about Chicago Public Schools as an example, this is a school system mainly comprised of low-income minority students. without data, without a laser-like focus on how our students are progressing, we wouldn't be able to tell the transformational story that we're experiencing here in CPS. And it isn't one story where, things looked bleak and then, we had 1 year of assessments and, all of a sudden everything is looking rosy. If that occurred, they'd have Eddie and FBI and everybody else in here investigating what we're doing. But it's a story of slow, sustained progress. And I know from working directly in public schools, you're working extremely hard on tough issues. It requires a focus so that you can measure slow, sustained progress, which is what I talk about all the time. It also helped to reinforce our message because we not only did we see some improvements in test scores, gains in particular, not yet attainment, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but we saw rising graduation rates, freshmen on track, and other metrics that told a complete story about what was happening in our schools, and I think that that was extremely important. On the flip side, I do think that there is caution that we should heed. When things get measured, things get done. We also know if we focus too much on measurement, there's an incentive to do things that you shouldn't do, and we have to be keenly aware of that. But I don't think that that's a reason not to pay attention and to not keep track and keep focus of what's happening. And then the last piece I'll say is just an equity piece. I appreciate the push in some areas around, not looking at test scores in order to make selections, but you cannot convince me that an African-American student from a low-income background is going to get a shot anywhere without proving that they have met certain academic standards. If you can convince me that if we remove those assessments that they're going to get that same level of access, I'll be the first person to sign up. But my experience and history has shown that we always have to prove on paper that we belong, and that's just one of the things. So as an educator, I always teach my students that this is what you need to do in order to have access to the American dream that we've all been sold on.
Thank you. Eddie, I have a question for you that's really two questions,
Okay.
or an opportunity to comment on one thing and then answer a question. There are folks in this room, philanthropists in this room, who were very interested in and supported the strategic decision support centers, which I think have had a demonstrable impact on reducing violent crime in certain neighborhoods.
Right.
On the other hand, which I'd like to hear, you could tell us a little bit about that. On the other hand, there are folks like the Joyce Foundation who have invested in community policing and really deeply invested in community policing, particularly in District 15, and we're hoping that it will work and will spread. So SDSCs have been terrific. Maybe you can mention something about that. But I'd also like to hear a little bit about what's the balance between sort of a data and technology-driven policing strategy with one that's more about community engagement and community policing.
Okay. Yeah, those are two great questions, as a matter of fact. So let me start with the SDSC question first. So when the mayor approached me, Mary Emanuel approached me in 2016 about taking on the responsibility of being a superintendent, he asked me what were my thoughts on why the crime was spiking like it was and how do we get to a better place. And one of the things that I told him was we have to refocus our energies on doing things differently. You can't replace human intelligence, but at the same time, let's face it, criminals use technology to their benefit because their job is to commit the crime, our job is to catch them, right? So I knew that one of the things CPD, the police department, lacked in was an investment in technology in terms of the district resources. So we had followed a model that most police departments use where we had a centralized intel intake place. We call it CPIC. That's housed at 35th Street and Police Headquarters. I knew, being a district commander in one of the tougher districts, that it's more beneficial if the district commanders have that kind of technology at their fingertips. So I was able to convince him that, and it wasn't a hard sell at all because—
Wait, you convinced Rahm Emanuel to do something?
Yeah. But again, it wasn't a hard sell because he, to be honest, I couldn't have had a better partner in trying to flip this thing around. So the SDSCs, the Strategic Decision Support Centers, many of you all have invested in that for us. Ken Griffin gave us $10 million to help us get this thing going, because these are nerve centers in each of the 22 police districts. They're in 20 of the districts right now, and it's comprised of Hunch Lab technology, so that's a software, pod cameras, so the cameras that you see around the city, shot spotter technology, and that's huge for us in terms of cutting down our response time to shots fired, because it's able to pinpoint exactly where those shots are being fired, and we're able to respond to it probably 7 minutes quicker, so much so that we've actually gotten there with this technology while the person is still firing the weapon. So you can't dismiss that in terms of how it's assisted us. And then the last piece of that is we were able to give smartphones to all the field officers, so that technology and all the intel that was pumped into these SDSCs, the field officers could get that information real time, as opposed to a dispatcher or somebody else pushing it out to them. So I'm convinced that three things really helped us reduce the crime spike that we saw in 2016. So people always ask me what caused that. We'd be here for 3 hours talking about that, because it's complex. But our response to it, I think, we invested in growing the department by 1,000 more officers. The community policing piece was a huge piece of it. And then the third bucket is that technology. So all three of those things combined help us. In 2016, I think we ended up with like 778 murders in the city. Now, to put that in proper context, when I became a police officer in the late 80s, early 90s to probably the mid 90s, we were averaging 800 to 900 murders a year. So we still hadn't hit that peak, but this was the highest we had seen in the last 20 years. And we brought that down that first year by about 23%. And we've still seen a steady decline. But in terms of the second piece of your question, how do I think community policing and the technology piece work together? Listen, you have to have both. Either one of those pieces by itself is not the magic wand. But when you combine all these things, you have to take a holistic approach to it. So the technology is great. It really is. But when somebody is harmed by a shooting, or a mother loses their child, that's not a number, that's a person. And so we have to continue to build those relationships. And the community policing part, Joyce Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, quite a few philanthropists have given us the funding to do that, because the city's pockets aren't infinite like some people may think. So, so we have to have help in doing that. But what that does is it helps us, it gives us a force multiplier when we're trying to attack the violence in our city. If we can't develop those relationships and maintain them, that human intel is invaluable, because this is the kick to it. So the technology piece of it, we're feeding data and using algorithms, right? But it can't predict those spikes that happen just like that. So we need the people in the communities to tell us that information, give us that information. That's why the community policing piece is so huge. I tell people all the time, I worked the same beat in the 6th District, Gresham, for about 9-10 years, and I knew everybody over there. And what that did for us is when something happened on that beat, people would call me and give me a heads up. So the fact that you all are helping us build that community policing foundation, because now one of the first things I did becoming superintendent, remember, Chicago was a leader in the nation with community policing in the mid-90s, right? And then we fell off the rails, and a lot of that was because of funding. Well, now, instead of using community policing as a strategy, we're using it as a philosophy. So all 13,400 police officers now engage in some form of community policing. And a lot of that is because you all have given us the funding to be able to get those programs out there and do that outreach in the community. Because, Ellen, I tell you this, I've been a cop 31 years, and the one thing that I do know is that the Chicago Police Department is only as strong as the faith that the community has in it. And the community policing piece, that definitely helps build that relationship. Yeah. So I want to thank all of you all for helping us with that, because that's something that's sorely needed.
Yeah. I heard a story. I was asking for give me some specifics about how it's working in District 15. Like, what does it actually mean? So that some officers are taken off their mics for a period of time, and they can interact with folks, and they're not getting called off on this call or that call. And the specific story that I was told was that there was a couple, a homeless couple, that was living in the vestibule of a bank at like the ATM vestibule. So and they were, like, their whole life was living in this vestibule, apparently. The bank wasn't happy, the community wasn't happy, and the police officers, previously might have just arrested them, taken them away, and who knows what would have happened. But instead, they had the capacity and resources to provide counseling and services to this couple who subsequently, did move out of the space. And, that was a good result. And I think from my understanding, the police officers felt good about what they were able to do. And the community felt good that something positive had happened in the community without a criminal justice, a crime orientation.
And I tell you, Ellen, you hit it right on the head, because think about this for a moment. When law enforcement was first formed, and I wasn't there, believe me, but when it was first developed, just think about this for a moment. The mission of law enforcement was to enforce the law, right? Now, we fast forward up to 2019. Unfortunately, most of societal ills are dumped at the doorstep of police. So we have to have the resources to point people in different ways, because Ellen is absolutely right. 10 or 15 years ago, we probably would have just let the bank sign a complaint for criminal trespass, and we would have been done with it. That's not the way to do things. Some people just need some help in pointing them in the right direction. And I can tell you all firsthand, those cops, when they're able to do things like that, it makes them feel great, because the majority of cops out here are trying to do the right thing. Yeah. We just need to provide them with the tools in their toolbox to be able to do those things. And that's why I say thank you all for providing that funding, because if this was 10 years ago, there would have been no solution other than to lock those folks up.
Here's a question for you, Janice. So given the tremendous progress, and we all know you're doing such a great job, but there are a lot of kids who are being left behind. They're not showing up in school, they get kicked out of school, problems happen. And I know that ABFI has given a significant gift to support a strategy that you have developed for those young folks. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. And I was going to actually add that to the initial statement earlier in response to your question, which is if you pay attention to data, sometimes it could mask some of those underlying issues, but it can also be very helpful in elevating those issues. So in particular in Chicago, when we think about our students that did not complete high school for whatever reason, some students make a choice, if you believe a child can make a choice to leave school. And unfortunately, oftentimes they leave because of other circumstances, life circumstances, or lack of support or extra support and by way of a nudge from the school to push them out. And so what we were able to see is that even with our rising graduation rates, we saw two things: graduation rates and test scores. The disparities continue to exist. So all tides were rising, but not at a fast enough rate, in particular for our African American students and our Latino students. And so we weren't able to close that gap. The other piece is that there's a group of students where it had become too easy to cast them aside in our district. And if we didn't have the strong and robust data systems that we have now, we wouldn't be able to identify that quickly, but more importantly, know who those students are. And so fast forward, I think in 2011, we had about 60,000 students between the ages of 14 and 18 that were considered dropouts living in Chicago. We have cut that number in half, more than half, so that's something we celebrate. There are fewer students that are dropping out of school, more and more of them are graduating, but now we know more about those students. And so through our partnership with Education Lab, because of the ABFI grant, we've been able to better identify those students, identify characteristics about the students that help us understand what's going on. And we started to learn some troubling things, like 38% of the students in this subset, in this population, have been involved with the criminal justice system, either as victims or perpetrators, in some cases both. Many of them have also had other traumatic incidents happen in their life. And so because of these systems and because of that support, we've been able to identify those things and now create stronger option schools programs, and option schools are alternative schools for people who aren't familiar with that terminology, but making sure that those schools aren't just there to recover high school credits, but they're there to provide resources. So resources may include helping children, students who may be parents, helping students who may be living on their own. Many of our students in our option schools live independently in some way, shape, or form, helping them navigate any kind of involvement they may have with the criminal justice system. A lot of the students, about 8% of the students in this population spend some time, at least 30 days, within the jail system here, Nancy B. Jefferson or York. So how do we make sure there's a soft handoff when they leave that system and come back into CPS? Those are some of the things that we've been working on, and I think it's another way to highlight the importance of looking at data, because if we didn't, we would just celebrate that fewer students are dropping out and more kids are graduating, but we're actually choosing to go deeper. And then the last plug I'll give to our partners at the Education Lab is that they worked hand in hand with CPS as we created our 5-year vision for the district. And for the first time, we launched that vision in March of this year. And this was the first time that we've ever clearly articulated that students in our option schools were a priority and articulated our strategy to support them, and that was due to the partnership that we have with the Education Lab.
And more, that's great, more students graduating, and a very high percentage of those students, if they go to college, go to city colleges of Chicago. Mm-hmm. What are you doing to smooth that transition, to improve that transition, and to ensure that those kids actually complete they are kids, they're still 18 years old, complete their degree at city colleges or transfer?
Yeah, well, we're doing a couple of things. First, again, through the To and Through project, which is another partnership we have with University of Chicago through the consortium, is examining where our students go. So we have seen more and more students graduate and matriculate into college, both 2- and 4-year colleges, but we also saw, because we're collecting this data and tracking them beyond high school, that many of our students, about 40% who go to a 4-year university, actually come back and end up going to a city college. And so it's in our interest as a district to work directly with city colleges so that those are destination schools and kids don't feel like it's a school of last resort. And part of that was not only the district working with our partners at City College, but also making sure that students saw the benefit of attending a city college, and also paying more attention to match and fit. Because some of these universities that we were sending our students to, once again, because of the data, we could see that CPS students graduate at a much lower rate than, in some cases, they're already abysmal graduation rates. And so we can better advise students, maybe you shouldn't pick this school because you like the football team or whatever, or your cousin went there, but pick a school where they have demonstrated success working with students that come from Chicago public schools. And so those are some of the ways in which we've changed the guidance counseling process, because that data is available to us.
And I'm going to change the subject entirely. Thank you. Consent decree. The city now operates under a consent decree. There has been progress, I believe. There's a lot of information that has been flowing in lots of directions. Can you give us an update on that?
So the consent decree, I think what's important for people to know is, listen, there's 2 things I have learned since becoming superintendent. And one of those things is that law enforcement, we typically would operate kind of like the military, where we think we know everything. And being a cop for 31 years, 28 when I became superintendent, we always thought we had all the answers. And I have found that to not be true. And in working with the University of Chicago Crime Lab people, I found out that really wasn't the case. and it was just one of those things where I didn't think we'd be able to merge geeks, so to speak, and cops in the same room to figure things out. But it has been a seamless transaction, and I thank you all for that.
If I might just interrupt, I visited one of the SDSCs, and I felt like I was on a stage set, because the crime lab folks looked like they were the hair and the glasses, and the police officers looked like police officers. It was. Everybody was playing their type, but working together.
And I tell you, that was something. If you had told me that 15 years ago, I would say you're out of your mind, because cops typically just they just resist things like that. So to the University of Chicago's credit, the folks that were sent over there, they blended in so well to the point where when command staff members move, they want to take their analysts with them. But the consent decree. So one of the things I think that is helping us as a city was we knew that a consent decree was coming well before it came. And so what happened was myself and members of my team, we went all over the country, and myself in particular talking to police chiefs that were under consent decrees to see what they had done. So I think it's important to know that when the Department of Justice did their investigation, they talked to a lot of cops, and probably 80% of the recommendations that they came out with came from rank and file police officers. So that lets you all know that your police officers want to be the best, they want to have the best training, and they deserve it, to be quite honest. They should be the best trained police force in this country. So the consent decree is going to give us the pathway to do it. But in saying that, because we knew all of these things that were going to be recommended, we were able to get a jump start on it. So a lot of the recommendations contained within the consent decree has already been done, but there's still a lot more work to be done, because believe it or not only is Chicago on a pathway to being one of the safer big cities in this country, we're also on a path to be a model agency for this country. With the collaboration between University of Chicago Crime Lab, our philanthropic world, and then I have to commend Dr. Jackson, because she and I talk a lot, because believe it or not, there is a correlation between crime and how well our students are doing in school. And so we have to talk a lot, and I got to commend her because, and this isn't to throw stones at anyone, but I think that the collaboration we have now is probably the best it's ever been between the police department and CPS, because we just have to invest in our young kids, because I don't want to have to deal with them at some point. And listen, I would tell you all this. People think I have a tough job.
No. I'll keep this one over that one.
Man,
Nobody thinks I have a tough job. I don't know. Hey, so we've talked a little bit about what a tough job the rank and file officers have, though, and it is really tough.
It's
and
tough.
I know that a project you're working on with the Crime Lab is a system to identify early on when an officer is having emotional issues or family issues or something that is going to have an impact on their ability to do their job.
Correct.
Can you just talk about that briefly, and then we'll wrap up?
So early intervention system, EIS, is what we're calling it. And law enforcement all over the country have struggled with trying to figure out how we can develop a system to see when officers need help, and not just with misconduct and things like that, but things in their family lives. Because remember, all day during our tours of duties, we solve problems for other people. Don't think for a moment when we go home, we don't have those same issues too. So the early intervention system, we're working with the University of Chicago Crime Lab to come up with a system, and I'm pleased to say it's a work in progress, but we're getting close. We're getting really close to developing the algorithms and the things that we should be looking at to identify when officers are getting in trouble. And that will help us stop them, hopefully, before they cross the line. But one of the things that I think is going to take a little bit more time is we then have to go back and look at the services that we provide to the police officers when they get in trouble. Because the one thing about being a cop, you deal with crisis every day for the most part. And so you become a little skeptical of everything. So cops don't trust a lot of things. So we have to normalize them seeking help, and then we have to put the right resources in place and services so that if they do need help, they won't be afraid to use it. Because I'm sure you all know we've struggled in the last year with officer wellness and suicide. And I have to tell you all, internally, that's probably my biggest project right now. That's the most important thing to me. Because look at it like this. If we don't ensure these police officers are 100% mentally and physically healthy when they come to see you, then you'll get a substandard product. And we want them to be right because you all are our clients. So we want them to be right when they come out to see you. And for so long, because law enforcement is such a macho industry, we just never took the time to really look at that. But I have to tell you all now, because of the help and assistance that Ken Griffin has given us, MacArthur, Joyce Foundation, all of you all, we are leading the country right now in this particular field. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm going to get ahead of myself. In talking to my team and the University of Chicago, I think when we get this nailed down, this will absolutely be a model for the rest of the country to emulate so that we can give these officers the proper support that they need.
So we have 1 minute left. What's on your wish list for philanthropy and the crime lab? If you have 1 or 2 things you'd like to see us be thinking about going forward, and that's a question for both of you.
I mean, I talked about the students in our option schools. I think that's the area where we need the most support. I think it's the place where we're doing the most innovation as well. I think we have a pretty strong approach and multiple strategies for tier 1 instruction, if you will, and support for our students in the district. But we do have students who face a lot of challenges, whether it is academically or from a social emotional aspect. And so we need more support to work with those students to, number one, prevent them from dropping out of school or seeking alternative school settings. But if and when they do make that choice, we need to make sure that there is a robust set of offerings in those programs so that students can get the support that they need, get back on track, and successfully complete high school and go off to a post-secondary career or pathway that makes sense for them.
Okay, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I had 2 things. The first one, obviously, is the officer wellness piece, because we just need the funding to be able to hire the right people, to be able to provide the right resources to ensure that these officers are getting the support that they need. Because when you look at the suicide rate for police in terms of the general population, it has skyrocketed. And here in Chicago, we're really feeling the brunt of that. Although we have done some things to kind of, level it off a bit, that's one of my wishes. And the second wish is this. Now, generally, I don't mention this because I just don't. But I'm going to break that rule today since we're here talking.
Everybody's on the edge of their seats.
So the technology piece of the investments that you all have made has helped us so much. And one perfect example of that, 2 examples, is the TV guy. I'm not going to say his name, but the TV guy that said he was the victim of a hate crime.
Oh.
That dude.
I was told not to bring that up.
Right. So it's a little bit too soon, but the funding that you all provided us gave us the wherewithal to be able to track what we track via video, to be able to really crack that case. And the second case that was absolutely critical, this funding that you all have provided was absolutely critical. When the young lady was shot downtown about a month or so ago, and we tracked that guy down, all of that was based on the technology and the funding that you all provided for us to be able to put the strategic decision support centers now in the detective division. So when you all see things on TV that they can do with technology in law enforcement, we can do that now because of you all. So thank you all for that. But those are the 2 things, but I have to really thank you all for that.
I'd like everybody to give a round of applause. We are so fortunate to have such really, really fantastic leaders in our city. So thank you very much.